In this video I will be sharing some information on the 10 suspicious deaths covered in the documentary Everyone Counts, as well as looking into and question some of the steps taken by authorities in the very recent case of 16-year-old Kylie Rodney. The documentary Everyone Counts is available on YouTube, and if you haven't watched it, I think you should. It's very informative. These 10 deaths occurred in Auburn City of Placer County between 2009 and 2015. They were all ruled a suicide accident or stays open. 6 of the victims were found in the canal and 4 were found on the train tracks. The first victim found in the canal was David Miller. The autopsy showed no alcohol intoxication, appropriate levels of pain meds prescribed for his disability, and some marijuana. Yet, the Placer County Sheriff's Department issued a report where they addressed 5 of the canal deaths, including David's, and said that a common theme for all of them was substance abuse. The autopsy report showed a deep blunt force head wound and gray-brown soil under his fingernails and embedded in the palms of his hands, which was, according to the report, a result of him working with his hands in manual labor. The only problem is that he hadn't been working in over 20 years due to a motorcycle accident in the 80s that had left him disabled. The second victim is Bradford Ashcraft. Private investigators on the case spoke to a witness who is deemed by them as credible due to the fact that he was able to describe exactly what the victim was wearing, even though that information had not been made public. He also claimed that he saw 3 law enforcement officers beat up a man and heard them throw him in the canal. He also claims having seen 2 police cars speeding away from the scene. Bradford had defensive wounds on the knuckles and a circular bruising around his left wrist. Yet, in the report made by the Placer County Sheriff's Department, there were no signs of a struggle in any of the first 5 deaths, one of which included Bradford. Victims number 3 and 4 are Larry James and Nicasio Garcia Bonilla. Larry was found within 24 hours of his death, and per the autopsy report, he had suffered acute fractures of multiple broken ribs and multiple wounds. Nicasio and Larry were friends and had been out drinking at a bar the night both of them died. Nicasio was, however, unlike Larry, found in a state of advanced decomposition 4 weeks later. Victim number 5, Matthew Templeman, was living in a tent by the canal by his own free will. He is described by his sister as an animal lover with a brilliant mind, but just didn't seem to fit into the society. Shortly before he died, he told his sister that the police had threatened him.
He was very upset, and he said, Carrie, the police threatened me today. And I said, what did they say, Matt? And he said, you better leave town or else.
At first, Matthew's sister was handed the wrong autopsy report and his phone, still wet, in a bag. When given the right autopsy report, it was revealed that he had injuries that resembled gunshot wounds.
But the way that they conduct an investigation is a direct message. That his life in and of itself. Yes. That his life didn't matter, his death didn't matter.
After these 5 deaths, a fence was put up around the canal for safety reasons, but still another man was found deceased in the water not short after. Richard Hill is victim number 6, and although a news article claims a man tried to save him by pulling him up from the canal with a rope, neighbors at the trailer park next to the canal claim they heard a fight and a splash, but law enforcement didn't bother to speak to any of the witnesses who had actually seen or heard anything.
I mean, he just wasn't concerned at all about it.
Not in the least. Didn't ask you any more questions.
Did not ask me anything else. Like, he didn't care.
After this, instead of in the canal, victims started showing up on the train tracks. Victim number 7 is Lowell Gardner. His mom suspected foul play right away and expected an investigation, but never heard anything from law enforcement. He was not suicidal, had just gotten a new home and was excited to move in. The onboard camera of the train was viewed by an officer at the Placer County Sheriff's Department and described a large pile or lump laying motionless partially across the tracks. No special forensics were performed. Victim number 8 is Dana Bass. All of her friends were positive that she was not suicidal, and the night she died she had an argument with a man. The autopsy report was for some reason very focused on her reproductive history, but never mentioned if she was essayed or not. The report also mentions gray-brown soil present under her fingernails and massive trauma to her head. A friend says that the cops never spoke to her or anyone else in the friend group who spent time with her that night. Victim number 9, Ronnie Daniel Jr., had been out bowling with friends and had just picked up some food at the store for himself and his cat. He was laying with his head on the rail when the train decapitated him. The sheriff arrived at his mom's home in the morning.
I asked him what happened, and he told me that it was an apparent suicide. Shouldn't make any sense. Not one thing did they tell me that actually came to that conclusion. They'd already made their determination, and they were not going to go any farther with it.
When the mother and father got to see him at the funeral home, they clearly saw massive bruises on his knuckles.
I knew it. I said, no, those are fighting wounds. He was fighting with somebody. They're only his knuckles.
Friends who were with him earlier that night said that he was happy and having a good time. He had no bruises on his knuckles at that point. Another disturbing detail about this story is that later on, Ronnie's father went to the tracks and discovered that parts of his son had been left at the scene.
They didn't clean nothing up. I found parts of my son. They didn't clean it up like they should have. And who lays there? That's when the deputy told me that he was laying there with his hat over his face, and the engineer said that he never even flinched or moved. I'm like, dude, you can lay there and do that. There's no way.
Victim number 10, Calvin Kelly, had been hanging out with friends during the day, and at night he went out to the local club and proceeded to walk home. In the morning, the parents got a call from the hospital saying that Calvin had been pulled out from under a train and was in surgery. Calvin was hit and dragged under the train before the train stopped and he was pulled out. After 2 weeks on life support, Calvin passed away. His father went to the tracks himself and found evidence showing that he must have been badly injured before the train hit him.
Which indicates that he was laying here bleeding out when the train struck him. And after we looked further, we found blood right where the blue car is.
His personal items were still left at the scene, including his shoes. Calvin was always happy and not at all depressed or suicidal.
They just want to say he killed himself or it was an accident, and they didn't investigate from the get-go. They never collected anything for evidence.
Police claim that they checked videos from businesses at the site, but the industrial park manager says that never happened. The police also stated that they had spoken with Calvin's brother, but that was also not true because Calvin never had a brother. The police report also says that witnesses were uncooperative, but still they closed the case for some reason and left it over to the Union Pacific. Calvin's family were told from the beginning that his phone was in evidence.
Well, I was trying to explain to you before on the telephone that there was a piece of evidence that was misplaced and it was located.
The cell phone.
And where was it?
not getting into everything right now, but
Well, it's misplaced, I mean, so.
it was in a vehicle and it was located.
Not contacting us when it happened, not wanting to talk to us at all, not wanting to go look at the evidence on the scene that we found, not going to the hospital looking at his body when he was laying there fighting for his life. When all the physical evidence, was there, but nobody wanted to go look at it because it wasn't your problem. And then when we go to Union Pacific, because you said it was their problem, and then they tried to contact you, but nobody here would talk to them either.
Although the police refused to look at Calvin's body at the hospital when he was still alive, the Placer Sheriff deputies made sure, against his family's wishes, to wait outside of the hospital to remove his body the instant he died. Investigative reporter Christine Kraft asked forensic scientist Kentin Wong if that is standard procedure.
Have you ever heard of anything like that?
And they didn't sign a release on the body.
Did not sign a release on the body.
That's highly irregular.
It's obvious that all these cases have been handled very poorly by law enforcement. It even seems like they tried their best to cover stuff up by saying they all died by accident or suicide. But why? What could they possibly gain from that? Calvin's sister has a theory.
And I look at this town and I think what it's been built up to be. This has been built up to be kind of like a little second heaven. This is the gateway to the Sierras. This is where everybody from the Bay Area is moving to. Housing prices are going up. I think that it would put a nasty scar on this community that has been considered to be such high class, high end, the place you want to go to. Why would you dare compromise that?
Former editor of the Auburn Journal, Eric Ruff, and former Auburn city official Dr. Gordon Ansley also shared their opinions.
A great number of people here, I can say that the people that I know thought it was suspicious from day one and outrageous that they would jump to a conclusion so quickly.
Yeah.
I guess in my opinion, it's easier to think it was an accident than to have to go and do a bunch of work investigating.
Did you get the feeling that they didn't have the resources or they just didn't want to investigate?
They didn't want it. Kind of like it's bad for business.
Kylie Rodney went missing on August 6th after attending a party at the Prosser family campground. A massive search was held with 20,000 man-hours and Placer County as the lead agency. 2 weeks into the search, sadly, she was found deceased in her vehicle submerged in Prosser Lake, but she wasn't found by anyone within the 16 agencies that had been searching. When law enforcement decided to scale back the search, the outside private dive team Adventures with Purpose arrived and managed to locate her vehicle in only 14 feet of water, 55 feet from the shore, right next to where she was last seen and where her last phone ping was. They found Kylie despite being told by authorities that the lake had already been thoroughly searched.
It is, the reason why we're here is because of the community support and the amount of work that was put into this investigation to where we could clearly identify very specific areas to search. The Adventures with Purpose folks did just a fantastic job at being able to locate the vehicle as quickly as they did, based on, again, a lot of heavy lifting that the folks behind me have done throughout the last couple of weeks.
We're struggling with clues, and so searches aren't super successful if you don't have a direction of where to search. Yeah, the ping for the data points and everything were near the water. It's not a very big lake overall. It's a man-made reservoir.
And what's the name of the dive team?
There's a lot of teams out there, so I don't know specifically. I know Alameda was mentioned. I don't know which all teams were brought in.
We were tasked on that particular event with looking for a cell phone. So they were asked by the investigators and the county sheriff that was leading that investigation to search the shoreline from the bank of the lake 25 feet outward and stop and stay on that line that depth along abreast of.
Wow. So they were 20. They were halfway there.
They were halfway there.
It typically for us in such, that was extremely shallow waters, and that was rare for us to have that visibility.
It's like going through mud. So these are tough operations.
Like Paul was saying, it's typically what we're finding stuff in you can't see in, or it would have been found already.
A diving operation like that is really almost like you're going into the water blind, and they're basically searching with hands.
It's very shallow, no current, great visibility.
And tracking underwater is an extremely difficult thing to do.
Well, that was very easy for us to do.
We're appreciative that they were able to come out and locate it. I also don't want to take away, though, from anything from our volunteers, as well as law enforcement that have been out there. I mean, we literally had people swimming in the water looking down.
Great visibility.
You can say, hey, why we weren't able to do it. I also could say that we eliminated a lot of areas that we would still be searching if we didn't have all the great people out there. And that helped give them some guidance as well, I think.
The amount of effort that all of these agencies put together really, truly is why we're here today. Lake is located within a search zone that we have been searching since the very beginning of our operation. I think it's very important to understand that all of that work did lead us to this time.
There was a report that Adventures with Purpose was told by police that they did not need to search Foster, or at least in the specific area where the car was found, because that had been extensively searched already. Is that true? Yeah, I'd say that's probably not accurate.
You said the searches have been unsuccessful. What's your new tactic moving forward?
I wouldn't say that they're unsuccessful. Anytime you're searching an area and you don't find something, you also are clearing an area that may not have something, so it's still purposeful. The lake was extensively searched with side sonar, with an ROV. We had divers, we had swimmers.
You said the car was 14 feet deep. Did y'all go that far to look for the car?
Yeah, some of that information is sometimes deceiving. So yeah, the car was reported at 14 or 15 feet. However, the water level since the 6th has also dropped a vertical 3.5 to 4 feet.
After Adventures with Purpose found Kylie, authorities arrived and retrieved the vehicle by first flipping it underwater. 2 windows were already opened, and they managed to break another one so that Kylie's belongings flew out into the water. And they were left there for over 2 weeks until a civilian found several items. Law enforcement were given the evidence but never entered the water themselves to see if anything else was down there still. The next day, on request of the family, the same guy went in and retrieved more items.
Yeah, so once the car was located, dive teams were assembled. I believe Placer County was probably still the primary dive team. They have to use lots of devices to lift the car, turn it over, and then the use of tow trucks was what made it possible for pulling the vehicle out of the water.
In forensics, we have standards and we have protocols for everything that we do in evidence collection, okay? And they were not followed, okay? And that's the plain, down and dirty, simple truth of the matter. It was not followed. There's only 2 reasons to deviate from a protocol or a standard, and that's life safety and evidence preservation. And neither of those 2 things, well, in terms of life safety, that didn't occur here. And evidence preservation obviously didn't occur here.
Can you talk about what happened last night in terms of taking the car out? What kind of law enforcement was there, and what happened last night?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the law enforcement partners you see behind me were present during that time, trying to do the best they could for ensuring that everything was done correctly.
I would not have done that. Would seal the windows, and you don't roll a vehicle over underwater that doesn't need to be rolled over. Do that on land.
On October the 5th, 2 months after Kylie went missing, footage with a full view of the lake and campground became known. Again, not law enforcement, but regular people on the internet pointed it out. The footage appeared to show headlights going into the water at the exact spot where Kylie was found, at the exact time her phone was turned off. The video came from the fire alert cameras that have been known for years to capture video of the area surrounding the lake. Although some people doubt that the footage actually show Kylie's car going into the water, it is still bothersome that law enforcement don't appear to have even checked this footage when she first went missing.
I called the California Highway Patrol. I identified myself as a retired New York City police detective, and I got a guy on the phone. I got a detective on the phone. I asked him outright, do you guys know about this footage? And he right away said, yes, we're aware of it. We received numerous calls, and they are enhancing it according to them.
They are out actively searching, knocking on doors, going to businesses, recovering video.
Whoever it was, they found it, and the police didn't, with 20,000 hours of investigating. It just doesn't smell right to me. I could be jumping the gun here, Ed, but really, it just freaks me out that nobody came up with this.
At this point, we've collected just a ton of information and video from gas stations, private businesses, private residences, ring cameras, etc.
Shame on them for not knowing that those fire cams were there. It took some internet detective to figure it out. And that's the up part about it.
Let me be clear. We have one team, one mission, and one goal, and that is to find 16-year-old Kylie Rodney.
But you didn't.
No. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't look good at all for this jurisdiction.
It's dirty. It looks dirty. It doesn't smell right to me. It's dirty.